Okay, welcome everyone. We appreciate you coming to tonight's meeting on the housing element, and we are going to be starting in just one moment. We have a few folks coming in through the waiting room, and we'll be starting in just a few moments here. Okay, well, it looks like we have everyone who's in the lobby ready to come on in, so let's get started. My name is Joan Chaplick. I'm with MIG. We're a consulting firm that is helping the city with tonight's meeting. And so we're going to get started, and I would like to now turn over the program to Kevin Gardner, the Community Development Director for the City of Burlingame. Kevin?
Thank you, Joan, and thank you everybody for coming this evening. We're really delighted that you're interested in housing issues here in Burlingame, and the housing element is the place to go. It is the city's master plan for housing. We update it every 8 years, and now it's time to update it. And we want to both share things that we're thinking about and also get opinions from the community. So this will be an interactive meeting where there'll be a lot of polling, and you'll be able to provide feedback, as well as there'll be areas for public comment as well.
Okay.
Next, please. So on the city team this evening is myself. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Burlingame. Also with us is Ruben Hurin, the Planning Manager. He'll be presenting some of the slides. Joseph Sanfilippo is our Economic Development and Housing Specialist, who's also here. Also on our team, although not in the meeting tonight, is Fazia Ali, who is an assistant planner. Some of you may know if you've been doing planning work here in Burlingame, and she's been helping us with the outreach.
Okay, well, I'll take over, Kevin. So here's our agenda for this evening. So as Kevin mentioned, we'll give you a few options for how you can participate in tonight's meeting. And then we have a presentation that's going to cover the housing element and housing sites. We want to share a little bit about the community input that we have heard to date. And then a big focus of tonight's meeting is on the policies and programs that will be included in the housing element. And then we reserve time for public comment at the end of the meeting. So we'll be having some polling questions. We're using the Zoom polling tool, so that will just come up on your screen. We also encourage you to submit your comments and questions using the chat. We appreciate the extra information, and all of our presenters are happy to stop and answer questions. If it's a simple one, they might just respond right back, and we'll stop periodically in the presentation as we need to answer any questions that you have. And then we'll have 2 minutes per person for public comment at the end of the meeting. We're on Zoom, and just to refresh your the controls that we'll be using, feel free to turn your camera on so we can feel a little bit more connected. We'll be using the chat for your comments and questions. And then also when we get to public comment, you can raise your hand. We'll call on you then. And if for some reason your raise hand isn't functioning the way you want it to, you can also drop your name in the chat and we'll give you a call. So let's test the chat and just get everyone participating right away. And so if you could drop in the chat one word that describes what you like about living in Burlingame. So let's take a few moments and see what people have to say about their just one word. Okay. One thing they like: everything. Okay. It's comfortable, neighborhood, safe. Okay, some very, very positive comments here about living in Burlingame. Any other folks want to share a comment? Okay, well, trees, comfortable again, walkability. Great, so these are all the type of things people say about great cities. So very happy to get your participation. Okay, so next we're going to do some polling. And we just want to get a sense of who has shown up tonight. And we'd like to learn a little bit about you. So my colleague Joey is going to pull up the Zoom polling question And our first question, we'd love to get a sense of how long you've lived in Burlingame. So are you new? You've been here less than a year? Or are you here somewhere between 1 and 5 years, 5 and 10 years, or 10 plus years? Okay, let's just a few seconds more for a few more results. Okay, so Joey, why don't you share the results to that polling question? And great, so 86% of you have been here more than 10 years and others at least 5. So good, we have some folks who have a lot of experience with the city. So let's go to polling question number 2. So we'll bring up, so do you work in Burlingame? So it's a yes, no, or it might not apply if you're retired or a student. So let's see what people's status is there. Okay, so I think we have just about everybody responding. Joey, why don't you share those results? Okay, so we have not quite thirds, but 38% work in Burlingame, 38% work outside of the city, and then we have some folks who don't work. Okay, let's go to polling question number 3. So it's the housing element. So we'd love to know about your housing situation. So please let us know if you own your home, if you rent your home. Are you someone who lives with family and friends where you don't have to pay rent? Or are you someone who currently doesn't have a permanent home? So just a few more seconds here so everyone can weigh in. Okay, Joey, let's share the polling results. Okay, so over 70% are homeowners, 14% renters, and 14% living with family and friends. Okay, great. We have a good mix tonight. Let's go to polling question number 4. So if you could tell us your age, this helps us understand how well our outreach worked and who's on the line here tonight. So, you know, along with, we have longtime residents, homeowners, and then in terms of our age distribution, and just a reminder, the polling questions are anonymous, so you're not giving away any secrets. Let's share our results, and happy to see that we attracted a pretty wide age range. So we have a few folks on the 18 to 29 spectrum, and then we also have folks in their 50s and 60s as well. So we have pretty good coverage of our age ranges. Let's go to polling question number 5. Okay, and so now we'd love to get a sense, if you're willing to answer, your race and ethnicity. The diversity and diverse participation is important to the process, and you providing us this information helps us understand who's participating tonight. Okay, and so how about if we share those results? Okay, so we have participation from white, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, and Asian or Asian American residents tonight. Okay, and I think we have one more polling question. And so how did you find out about tonight's meeting? So I know there's an email list that the city sent out. There were some flyers that were being passed out. The city uses social media and Nextdoor. And if anyone checks other, we would love to have you drop in the chat how you found out about tonight's meeting, because we're always trying to improve our outreach and make sure that we're reaching people and making sure that they know about important workshops like tonight that are going on in the city. Okay, so how about if we share those results, Joey? Okay, so we have, okay, the city email, Kevin. So your email list worked very well. Social media, Nextdoor, and let's see, in the chat, Okay, we have someone who found it on the city website, and someone who can't remember their outreach, but they know it's not one of the things on the list. Okay, great. Well, I think we are good with our polling questions. And so now we are going to dive into the content of our presentation tonight. And Ruben is going to walk us through the housing element presentation. Ruben Herron.
Great, thanks, Joan, and welcome everybody. Thanks for taking a little bit time from your evening on this beautiful warm evening to share it with us here. And I have lots of information to cover, so I appreciate your patience ahead of time. So several planning initiatives have been completed leading up to the current housing element. In March of 2015, the City of Burlingame initiated a multi-year process to update the city's general plan called Envision Burlingame. So many of you know about that or perhaps participated in those meetings. The City Council adopted the general plan and certified the accompanying EIR in January of 2019. As Kevin mentioned earlier, general plan is the master plan for the city. It sets out what the city wants to be doing in the next 10, 20, 30 years. In this case, the general plan will take Burlingame through the year 2040. The current general plan was an update to the general plan that was previously adopted in 1969. So it was a long time coming. Although it served Burlingame well for 50 years, it was time for an update. One very important chapter of the general plan is the housing element. It's the plan for all housing needed in our community. And state law requires that housing elements be updated every 8 years. Burlingame adopted its current housing element in 2015, and we are now working on the next update to be adopted in January of 2023, which would take us to 2031. Next slide. A big focus of the general plan was to meaningfully look at housing and how big the city should grow. We looked at how many people should be living here and how many people should be working here. When we started the process of updating the general plan, we asked the community, are there elements of the city or areas in town that you really loved and would not like to see changed? We also asked, are there areas of the city where you would like to see changes, maybe new opportunity areas and where improvements can or should be made? Burlingame has a variety of neighborhoods, each with its own special characteristics, and each of you here perhaps hopefully are spread out across the city and in our wonderful neighborhoods. We see neighborhoods with beautiful older homes and tree-lined streets to subdivisions in the hillside area that take advantage of long distant views. There are also neighborhoods in our downtown areas and along the El Camino corridor that provide more dense housing, but are walkable to commercial districts and public transit. Combined, these neighborhoods provide a variety of housing stock, including single-family homes and accessory dwelling units, duplexes, apartments, and condominiums. We heard that the community liked many of the existing neighborhoods as they were and didn't want to see any changes in certain areas. However, we also heard that perhaps there could be changes in some areas of the city, and that's what the different colored areas on this map are showing. So for example, take our downtown area around Burlingame Avenue. People enjoy experiencing our downtown, but also thought there could be some additional housing opportunities given its walkability to businesses and restaurants and its proximity to public transit. Burlingame train station and the bus lines along El Camino and California Drive. Let's look now at the El Camino corridor, uniquely lined with trees for most of its length throughout Burlingame. And this is, as we all know, if you live here in Burlingame, it's really unique, unlike any other city along El Camino. So in most cities, El Camino is a commercial corridor with businesses and commercial activity. However, Burlingame is unique compared to other cities in that El Camino Real is almost entirely residential, except for the north end and also the pockets near our Broadway and Burlingame Avenue commercial districts. You may not know this, but 52% of the housing in Burlingame is in multifamily homes, many of which are located along El Camino Real and conveniently located within walking distance to public transportation. Continuing to move north on the map, we also heard a desire for change in the North Burlingame and Rollins Road areas. North Burlingame includes the Burlingame Shopping Plaza, Mills Peninsula Medical Centers, other offices and health service related uses, and multifamily housing. Rollins Road is our light industrial area, which has done well and continues to thrive with a variety of businesses. The city realizes the importance of retaining this industrial base. Both of these areas are within walking distance of the BART Caltrain station in Millbrae. Given its proximity to the multimodal station there in Millbrae, the committee saw an opportunity to increase the density to allow more housing in this area. In the north end of Rollins Road in particular, the community thought that a live-work zone would be appropriate. Some of you may be familiar with the Dog Patch in San Francisco, or perhaps the Funk Zone in Santa Barbara. And it's kind of that sense is that what the community thought might work there, since it's got a good industrial base. It's not really meant to change the area entirely from industrial to residential, but rather to have these two uses coexist. Over time, we see housing, restaurants, service and light industrial uses engaging with each other and really creating a fun, unique neighborhood to live in. And we've already approved several high density projects in that area, and one has already broken ground in that area. Lastly, the community also looked at the Bayfront area, which is along the San Francisco Bay. And we looked at whether or not there should be any opportunities for housing in that area. However, the City Council, Planning Commission, and in working through the process, we decided that for now it would not be the best place for housing. The challenge here is really the lack of support services needed for housing, such as public transportation, schools and shops, police and fire departments. So without those support services, it's really difficult to start a residential neighborhood in that area. It's definitely a unique area. It is set apart from the city with Highway 101 running along it. But for now, the community decided that it's best just to keep it as a good employment area with hotels, offices, and destination restaurants. Next slide. So while there is a lot that goes into the housing element, there are several key components. They include a needs assessment, which is an analysis of the city's demographic, household, and housing characteristics and relating housing needs. Affirmatively furthering fair housing will look at the fair housing laws and take meaningful actions to address segregation and related barriers to fair housing choice. We'll also look at the proposed housing sites to meet the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, which I'll cover in a few minutes. It provides an overview of available residential sites for future housing development. And lastly, the heart of the housing element are the policies and programs responding to the needs of all types of household and income levels. It also includes solutions such as how to preserve existing housing, or especially affordable housing. Next slide. Let's take a closer look at housing needs, specifically as it relates to persons working in Burlingame. And you may be experiencing this yourself, or perhaps you know someone, so it hits close to home. There are approximately 33,500 people working in Burlingame. Retail, auto sales, hotels, light industrial, office, and healthcare industries are its major employers. Of the employees working in Burlingame, roughly 39% earn $40,000 a year or less, which is about $3,300 a month. So for the barista at your favorite coffee shop, waiter, or gardener, it would be challenging, if not impossible, to work and live in Burlingame. So one of the goals of the housing element is to establish programs or policies that would make it possible for all income levels to live in Burlingame. Next slide. At the start of the housing element update process, the state assigns each region a target number of housing to plan for, called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, pronounced RHNA. And you'll hear that as we go through the workshop or outside of the workshop, you'll hear that in discussions. They look at several factors to determine the RHNA, like how many jobs there are nearby and quality schools, how close people live to their jobs, and population. Cities are then required by state to update, by state law, to update their housing element plans for that target number. I do want to note that local governments don't build housing, but what we do is create the rules that shape where housing can be built, what types and how much in order to meet our RHNA. In the last housing cycle, which was from 2015 to 2023, we were required to provide capacity for a total of 863 units. That's the number there at the bottom under RHNA 5 allocation. As you can see on this table, the required total for this next cycle is 3,257 units, which is a huge, significant increase over the last cycle. What's important, though, is that we not just focus on this total number, but also on the allocation of units to different income levels, including very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income. Part of the allocations are based on our employment base. So Burlingame has a sizable employment base in the very low and low income categories. These are service jobs, baristas, hairstylists, janitors, and teachers, just to name a few. And we feel it's important to provide homes for everyone in the community, so we want to carefully look at ways to serve all income levels. The increase in housing allocations is not just a Burlingame issue, but a regional issue. As we often hear in the news, based on our healthy economy, our state needs a lot more housing. Closer to home, there are many jobs created in San Mateo County. The economy is doing very well here. But with more jobs come more people, and people need a place to live. And ideally, they won't have to commute far distances to work. That 3,257 number is daunting, and many communities are struggling to find ways to accommodate their RHNA numbers. I think the RHNA numbers throughout the state significantly increased. But I do have some good news. Burlingame is already positioned to accommodate our required capacity. Our general plan comes very close to covering the 3,257 units. So we're thankful to the hard work that the City Council, Planning Commission, and community put in looking for those change areas that we looked at on the other map and envisioning a lot more housing in these areas. Next slide. As I mentioned, we're in good shape. Here we see the distribution of what we call pipeline projects. These are projects that have been approved, are currently under construction, or are under review. And this adds up to 2,299 units, well on our way to meeting our capacity of a little over 3,200 units. And as you can see, many of them are spread out or are concentrated in the north end, where the community thought that that's an appropriate place to allow higher density. What this means is that no rezonings would be required as part of the housing element. And that in some communities could be difficult when you have to rezone properties. We kind of did that work ahead of time through the general plan and through some interim zonings in the north end to accommodate for a lot more units. So that work is definitely paying off. Next slide. Now, there are also potential sites in Burlingame, and that's kind of what the next step is, and it's part of the housing element. And it's based on a site's inventory analysis. So there are scenarios based on relative availability of vacant and underutilized sites in each area. Here we see the potential of 965 additional units, again, mostly in the North Burlingame area. And when we added the pipeline projects to the potential projects, that total ends up being near that 3,200 unit capacity that we are required to produce or provide opportunities for in our current RENA. Next slide. So what are our housing goals? For starters, these are just some ideas that we've heard to date, but we want to hear from the community and welcome additional ideas. First, we want to see that housing meets the needs of the community and workforce, providing for a variety of housing types. As I noted earlier, the general plan provides ample capacity for required housing units, so we don't have to do any rezoning. However, someone perhaps might say we should look at changing a certain area of Burlingame. So that's still a possibility, and we want to hear from everybody. We also want to see housing that is affordable to the city's workforce for all income levels, but especially for very low and low income households. A number of years ago, the city adopted development impact fees to help with providing affordable housing. And in collecting those fees, we want to think about what's the most effective use of those housing funds. Can they be used to subsidize lower income units or perhaps preserve existing affordable units? We also want to look at city resources, such as utilizing the city's surface parking lots to build affordable housing developments. Many of you may be familiar with the Village at Burlingame over on Park Road. It's a 132 unit affordable housing development that's currently being built on a former city parking lot, a surface parking lot in our downtown area. Our hope is that it will be a successful project and will be a good example for future development, since there are other surface parking lots throughout Burlingame in both of our commercial districts. We'll talk about housing policies and programs later in the workshop, but now I will turn it back over to Joan to go over outreach activities and community input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruben. And Ruben, you gave us a lot of great information, and I just want to stop and give people a chance if they have any questions that they want to drop in the chat while that information is still fresh. So we'll just pause for a moment and see if there's any questions that are coming in. There was a positive comment about the North Roland specific plan. So, okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions right now, but we will continue to answer them. So let's continue with the outreach. Okay. Oh, so here is a question. What is the ratio between apartments and condos?
That's a good question. I don't know that we have that specific data at this point. I know that the ratio between multifamily and single family is about, I think it's like 52 to 48, 52% being multifamily housing. My sense is that we have more apartment units throughout Burlingame than condos, but I don't know that breakdown.
I'm not sure if she might be referring to the pipeline projects. If we know a breakdown of apartments and condos in the pipeline.
So in the pipeline, I would say that the majority are apartments.
Okay. And then let's see, we have a comment where someone is asking, is it preferred high or medium density? And I'm wondering if the comment could reference, is that in a specific location?
It's North Rollins specific plan area.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there's a comment that right after that says, I know Millbrae prefers high density. How about Burlingame? So, you know, I think in the north end of Burlingame, we increased the densities there quite a bit. So that I think in that area of Burlingame, we prefer to see high density housing. However, there's also what we call the missing middle. So families that perhaps can't necessarily afford to buy a single unit dwelling or a single family home, but you know, some of the units that are being built are just too small for them. So it's that middle piece that we're missing. So we are starting to see some of those projects or interest in those projects where there are a lower number of units, but the units are slightly larger to accommodate for families. However, most of the high density projects are the smaller units.
Okay, thanks, Ruben. There's a question about ADUs, which are also known as granny flats. Do we project ADU conversions being made, and do we incorporate those projections into our RENA numbers?
Right. Well, since 2020, when the state law passed certain laws that made it a lot easier to build ADUs, Burlingame has seen probably an average of 65 to 70 ADUs being approved every year since then. Many of them are starting to get built now, and we can incorporate those as into the RENA. We can include a certain percentage of those into the RENA.
Okay, and then I think here's some you can answer collectively. Also, are there any plans for a 55 plus community? And then just a question, how about townhomes? So are any of those considered in the planning activities?
Let's see, on the townhomes, so we would consider that as a multi-unit or multi-family housing. So it's really up to the developer if they would like to develop a townhouse style or townhome style development. Our most recent example is the Summerhill project along Carolyn Avenue, between Carolyn Avenue and Rollins Road. The majority of the units are in the apartment building. However, there is a row of townhouses along the southern edge. And Kevin, I think there's what, 28 units, I believe?
22.
22 units
Yes.
in townhomes. So that's certainly a possibility, and we certainly welcome that. On the plans for 55 plus community, the Village at Burlingame project, I can't remember the exact breakdown, but there are senior living apartments that are being built with that project. We don't have any current projects that have either been recently approved or proposed. There might be some coming in the future. And Kevin, I'm not sure if that was part of any projects in the North End there.
The Peninsula Wellness Community they have not submitted anything, but that would be a predominantly 55 plus is our understanding. And I'm just looking up the number of senior units. So the Village of Burlingame, which is the affordable development being built with the city, has 132 units, and of those 54 are designated for seniors, and then the remaining 78 are designated for Burlingame workforce members.
Okay. So there's a question that relates to the person is asking, will we see the percentage of what income level is being served for affordable housing, very low income units in each building versus moderate? Will we as a community get a breakdown of what's being provided to the community?
So in this meeting, we don't have that information. We do have it available. We have a page. It's burlingame.org/major projects. We can put that in the chat. Now this does kind of have you going into the weeds. There's a table that we publish each month, and it has a list of everything that's either been approved or is under review. And it does include those breakdowns per project. So it's a little bit of digging. We can, for a future presentation, include more of that information. So we do track it. We just did not have it prepared for this presentation this evening.
Okay, and if you could drop that into the chat, that would be helpful. There's a question about, the person is glad that Burlingame is addressing the need for housing so proactively. How will the infrastructure such as new schools be financed? Is that anything you could speak to tonight?
Yes, so with each project that's approved, whether it's housing or commercial, there are public facilities impact fees. Those are collected and put into funds which are used to upgrade infrastructure in a general sense. There may also be project-specific upgrades. So for example, if a new housing development is being built and there's not adequate, the existing water line or sewer line is not sized accordingly, then it's the responsibility of the developer to upgrade those facilities so that they can serve the development appropriately. With schools, every development pays school impact fees, which then go to the district. They're split between the elementary district and the high school district, and those funds are used for construction of additional school facilities or acquisition of land for more school facilities. So the fees are the primary way of planning for those impacts.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So Ruben, how did we do in meeting the RHNA targets in the 5th cycle?
So that's something we'll be doing as part of the housing element, is evaluating RHNA 5. And if I remember correctly, we did okay on meeting the total number. That the challenge is always meeting the allocations for very low, moderate, and and moderate income. So that's always the challenge, and I don't think we quite met those targets. But certainly with this new cycle and with the policies and programs, we want to look at improving how we meet those allocations in this next cycle.
Okay. And I'm wondering if either you or Kevin could speak to what areas have we rezoned or will we rezone for bungalows, cottages, fourplexes, and duplexes? The person thinks they would fit extremely well in Burlingame.
Sure, I think I can take a quick, I think we have many areas in Burlingame that are already zoned, for example, R3 and R4, that will accommodate fourplexes or greater. We have many areas zoned R2 that will accommodate the duplexes. And I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but some of these areas are the areas that the committee thought they're doing well. They're providing the housing, good opportunities for duplexes, fourplexes. So we didn't really want to do any rezonings or big changes. With SB 9, Senate Bill 9, it does allow for 2 units to be built on any single family zoned lot. You can also split the lot to create 2 units on each lot. So that was not anything that the city had to do, but the state really imposed that on the cities. And that's a big opportunity. I would also say that with the ADU laws changed quite a bit in 2020, it allows for ADUs and JADUs, or junior accessory dwelling units, to be built along with the single family home. So there are many opportunities there too.
Okay, thanks, Ruben. And I think this is just a comment I want to share. With the increase of residential density development in the city, I believe now would be the opportune time to create a childcare impact fee for new developments, to create a fund to help support the childcare infrastructure in Burlingame as we invite more development and families moving to the city. And then as well, requiring housing developers to specifically include childcare in their housing developments. Okay, well, thank you for that suggestion. Let's see. And just a response to your comment, Ruben. I'm in Oak Grove Manor R1. I love a person who knows their zoning and think there's a great opportunity for duplexes and fourplexes, hopefully more ADUs as well to house more folks. Okay, well, we have a little bit more presentation to go through. So again, we'll stop and ask and get your questions answered. And then we also will be asking your opinion on some policy ideas as well. So I'm going to continue our presentation here and just give a quick review of the outreach activities that we have conducted to date. And in the schedule for preparing the housing element, our outreach has been conducted, concentrated primarily in March and April. So if you were at the Fresh Market on Sunday the 20th, we were out there with some maps and asking people's opinions and sharing flyers about the workshops. And so then our first workshop was Wednesday night, March 23rd. That was followed by another pop-up that we held on Broadway. So we had two very different locations and different participation and comments as well. We also, we're going to be reporting out briefly on a survey of city staff, and it was a survey conducted as suggested by City Council. We did some interviews with housing organizations, and then here we are with tonight's workshop. Staff will be doing a lot of work with the feedback that is received through these processes. And then on the 23rd, there's a joint session of City Council and the Planning Commission from 9 to 11. So 9 to noon, I'm sorry. So that will be another opportunity for people to share their comments and views related to housing. Just want to give a very high-level overview of the outreach activities. What we heard, very similar to the opening comments that you all shared in the chat, really positive things. People had very positive things to say about living in Burlingame. Great place to live, great community. They like the scale, local shopping, access to transit, continued support for locating the housing near transit. And also support for housing and variety of options. So similar to some of the comments in the chat, encouraging different housing types, we were hearing that while we were out at the pop-ups. And definitely support for affordable housing and making sure that essential workers can live in the community. So everyone from our service workers that we rely on to city workers, teachers, law enforcement, making sure that people can live and work in their community. We also heard some concerns. Many people concerned about how the community has changed over the years. And I think Bay Area especially, and I think, you know, Ruben was talking about the county's economy and the continued growth here. So things have been changing. We have more people. We're finding housing affordability isn't what it used to be. Prices have definitely gone up. Many people concerned about traffic and parking. We heard a lot about the trees, so they're definitely a signature of the community. And at the same time, people are concerned about their safety in some areas. So, and as someone who does a lot of work in the housing arena, this is the time I've heard the most comments about trees in a housing element. So I really appreciate everyone's feedback. And then along with the trees, we also heard some concerns about large businesses coming in, related commercial development, and some of the changes people thought that would bring with the community. So again, just a very high level overview there. Then, as suggested by City Council, we did a brief survey. We did SurveyMonkey. It was sent out to city staff. So there's about 220 full-time employees. And in a very short window, it was about, I think we had an 8 or 9 day survey window. More than half of the staff responded. And so we wanted to know where they lived. 82% lived outside of Burlingame. Then we wanted to know if they commuted, how long it took them to get to work. And about 30% spent more than 30 minutes each way, some 45 minutes or greater. And then when we asked if you could find housing that met your needs, that was affordable to you, would you want to live in the city of Burlingame? And 66% of the staff said yes. Then we asked if the city were to create some type of program to make rental housing, more affordable housing available to employees, is that a program you would consider participating in? And again, a very high response, 64%. And then this one was kind of a wild card question. The new city hall is being planned and designed, and there is this concept of mixed use. How would people feel about living in on top of City Hall or adjacent to City Hall, depending on the design of that facility? And again, if those units were in a price range that people could afford. And we got 61%. We're definitely willing to consider it. So, it's some feedback from staff, and the city's kind of a good size employer. So just some feedback we wanted to share, and we know that City Council is interested in these results as well. So now we're going to take you to the real meat of our information sharing, but also engagement opportunities with you. And so Kevin's going to talk to us about the housing policies and programs.
Thank you, Joan. So yes, a key piece of every housing element are the policies and programs. And in fact, it's goals, policies, programs, and they all, it's kind of a hierarchy. You start with your big goal, you set up some policies, and then you say, how do we do this? That's the programs. So it's an exercise. It's maybe not how we're used to talking about housing, but we're going to try to bring you along and test out some policies and programs that we've been thinking about that others have suggested. But first, if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about some of our, well, let me, thank you. This reiterate some of what I've talked about. We do want to provide opportunities for a variety of housing choices. So you set a policy and that becomes your kind of guiding light. Facilitate the development of affordable housing, remove barriers to housing, improve the condition of existing housing, preserve existing affordable housing, and promote fair housing. These are all objectives or goals, I would say, that we would want to support through a series of policies and programs. The policies and programs are basically you're laying out, how do we get this done? Next, please. So here's an example of an existing this is our current housing element. There's a policy require inclusion of affordable dwelling units in multiple family residential development. So that's a fairly simple policy. Supporting that policy, there's a number of programs. We just chose one, which is encourage public agency partnerships to provide housing, reduce commute time, and facilitate retention of groups like teachers, public employees, hospital and service sector workers. And the development that Ruben described, the village at Burlingame, is our first example of a workforce development with senior housing as well, which is intended to meet the objectives and fit the parameters of this program. There was also a program, consider adoption of a residential in lieu fee option. And what does that mean? It means that new development, whether it's commercial or residential, we talked about these impact fees. So there's also a housing impact fee. With commercial developments, it's pretty easy to understand. It's new jobs come, people looking for housing. So we collect some fees to help us build up the housing stock, and particularly affordable housing. Same is true with residential, a little less so in terms of just the scale, but new residents do want new services. So that does have an impact on the housing supply. But we also created a program adopted in 2019 that allows a developer to choose either pay the fee or build the units within their development at affordable rents. So that was adopted, and we are now seeing lots of developments with lots of different below market rate units being allocated as a result of this, this program. Next, please. Another program is encourage alterations to existing structures that improve access for physically disadvantaged, including the developmentally disabled population. And then a program supporting that is to improve the livability of housing units for the disabled population. We created a reasonable accommodations ordinance that allows retrofits that may not comply with conventional building codes. We have allowed supportive and transitional housing in residential districts and made it no more difficult and ideally easier than other developments in that same zone. and allow persons with disabilities to request disabled parking curb markings in front of their homes. We do think there's more work to be done on this. In particular, we're aware there's a linkage between providing housing suitable to developmentally disabled persons and also the affordability, as sometimes the resources of developmentally disabled folks are limited. So we can do more on this, but this shows that this was a first pass at these policies. Next, please. Last, here's an example: encourage the development of a variety of housing types that are affordable to very low and extremely low income households. And that is something that we've been working on. And in fact, the city's come a long way. There's a lot of ground to still cover, but in terms of providing units that are, we've typically provided units in either the above market or moderate income categories, but there's a whole range of categories to low income, very low, and extremely low. So these were a number of suggestions, and those could be carried along if they are good, or they could be further reinforced and made better with our next housing element. Next, please.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So Kevin's given you some example policies. Obviously, we haven't gone through the entire document, but to give you an idea what is already existing. And now we have 7 policy ideas that we're seeking some direction. So we're going to start. Kevin will give us a description of what the policy idea is. He'll say a little bit about it. And we're going to have a Zoom poll, and this is not a binding vote. It's a pulse. It's feedback. So we're going to ask you, if you're super excited about it and you love it, please respond that way. If you're good with it, you like it, that's great. And if you're not crazy about it, if it's something you think the city should stay away from, we'd like to know that too. And then we'll also be asking if you, as we go through these, after you poll, if you want to drop any of your comments in the chat to give us an idea of why you made the selection that you did. So Kevin's going to explain the policy, and then we'll have our polling come up. So let's get started with the first one, Kevin.
Great, thank you. So the first question, and this is something that's been floating around in discussions with the City Council, our Planning Commission, and as we've discussed, our housing element. Currently, the city has a majority of rental housing. It's a little more than 50%, as Ruben mentioned. And that's a great thing. It's sort of the city's secret in terms of providing a lot of housing to support its workforce. However, also home ownership is a way to build equity and kind of start climbing the ladder and getting the stability that would come with that. So one question is, should there be more focus on providing affordable is relative, I will say. So a townhouse will be more affordable than a house. It still may be pricey, but again, it's relative. And then another topic that's come up is whether to relax the condo conversion ordinance that right now condos cannot be converted if there's more than 20 units in a building. And that was intended to preserve rental stock. But at the same time, conversions tend to be the more affordable entry level ownership opportunities. So it's a balancing act. So these are things we're looking at. Should we create some programs of policies that would encourage more ownership opportunities, particularly in this in either the townhouse or the entry level multi-unit developments.
Okay, so let's have our first poll come up. And if you could just give us a pulse, how does this strike you right now based on what Kevin just described? And also, we'd like to encourage, if you have any comments that you want to drop in the chat to help us understand, what you dislike about it or what's so appealing about it, that will be helpful information as well. So let's see if everyone has weighed in. So Joey, why don't you share the polling results? And again, this is good feedback for the city. So 43% love it, 36% like it. We have some folks with reservations who aren't too enthusiastic about it. And again, if you want to drop that feedback into the chat, we'd appreciate that. And we are also, I'll be moving back and forth once we get some comments, but we have our digital whiteboard that will be populating with the comments that come in so that we have a good record of everything that we're seeing tonight. So with that, well, thanks for our first polling question. Let's see, we have some comments in the chat here. Let's see, just about, I understand making them available, it provides the entry level. They're still going to be super expensive and will diminish rental availability. And then just some comments about BMRs, below market rate units, for sale units. They're convoluted with resales having to be BMR. There's some positive comments about condo conversion. Also some concerns about the idea of lowering the threshold that might impact rental housing stock in a negative way. Okay, well, those chat comments give us that additional detail that helps us understand, and we'll continue to capture comments as they come in. So how about if we go to our second polling question? And I'm going to do the next slide. And okay, we don't need the question just yet. So Kevin's going to explain the second policy idea.
So this is something we've been working on. Some of you may have heard of what we're calling a soft story study. And a soft story, very simplistically, is they're all over Burlingame. It's an apartment building with a big open carport level on the ground floor, and then a couple of levels above of housing. A lot of them built in the mid-century. They look kind of like they're on stilts. The concern is that in earthquakes, they're quite vulnerable. They're top heavy, so earthquakes move side by side, and then you start having the whole thing moving side by side, and then those little spindly columns on the ground could collapse. So one thought of our soft story committee, and I do see one of our committee members is here, so thank you for joining us, would be to subsidize the rehabilitation or the earthquake retrofits of these buildings in exchange for some of the units being preserved for below market rate households. And so that would be ideally the incentive for an owner to embark on the expense of the retrofit, but then it would come with the obligation of keeping some of those units affordable to below market rate households.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So Joey, let's have our second poll. And again, based on Kevin's general description of this proposal, let us know if you love it, like it, or aren't too crazy about it. And we'll see if there's just a few more folks who want to weigh in. Okay, and the results are shifting a little bit. So let's share these polling results. Okay, so so we have more than half like it, 23% love it, and then we have a little less than a quarter have some concerns or reservations about it. So let's see if we can learn why. And we did get a few additional comments. Interesting article shared about offering opportunities for renters to build equity. Thank you, Terry, for sharing that link. And some additional ideas. So, Terry, sorry, we're going to miss you for the rest of the meeting. Do we have any comments on specific to this? So, okay, so we have the buildings that need to be retrofitted tend to be the older, shorter buildings that could be demolished for denser, taller buildings. Okay, and then we have subsidies for seismic retrofit. with a good idea regardless of below market rents. This type of building is much more affordable than the newly built monstrosities that are much higher rents. Let's see. Mostly, I want to make sure the numbers are well thought out. $1 subsidy in exchange for 100% BMR would be a poor idea, for example. Okay. Let's see, we have just someone commenting on seconding the comment about the older, shorter buildings coming in. And let's see if there's just any more comments coming in on that polling topic. And Joey's keeping up with things. And again, we have our record of what we're seeing tonight and also comments that come in through the chat. Okay, let's go back to our third policy idea. So Kevin, why don't you let us know what this idea is all about?
So this is very similar, but instead of seismic retrofits, we're talking about energy efficiency retrofits. Some of these buildings, majority of these buildings are older. They were built under different codes. They may not have the latest and greatest in terms of either their energy performance, or it may be that there's opportunities to electrify buildings and improve their energy efficiency. And this is something that Peninsula Clean Energy has been interested in and has been talking to us about. So similar concept, if the city were to provide some assistance in financing an energy retrofit of an existing building in consideration for keeping some of the units up below market rate rents for duration, is that something that would be a good use of housing funds?
Okay, so let's have our third polling questions come up. So when it comes to subsidizing energy efficiency retrofits, so let us know your thoughts. Do you love it, like it, or not too crazy about it? Okay, let's just see. I think we have one. Well, no, well, Terry had to leave, so we're one less person on the polling. So Joey, why don't you share these results? And I'm going to take us, let's see. So 67% like it, 17% love it, and we have 17% that is not too crazy about it. So let's see what kind of comments we have coming in that will help us better understand comments related to the energy retrofit. So I have one here in the chat. Rather than a program of subsidies for BMR rents, could the city just set up a loan or financing program for people in the city? Okay, so there's an alternative to consider. Subsidizing solar is, I think it's good instead of hood. Subsidizing solar is good regardless of BMR requirements, again, because these older buildings are the affordable housing when compared with new buildings. This commenter, I don't have evidence to back this up, but I assume that would be more broadly applicable and apply to some less old units as well. Okay, yeah, we got a correction on that. So, okay, so we have some feedback there on people's rationale for their selections. So let's go to our fourth policy direction. And Kevin, so why don't you tell us about this next policy idea?
Great. So some of you may be aware, the city has a manager that helps us manage the affordable housing in the city. They're called House Keys, and the way it's set up right now is they manage primarily the new units that come online. Somebody applies, you apply through House Keys, and then it's kind of a whole screening process. They review the applications and provide qualified applicants to the property owner. Some cities have extended this to allow property owners to enter their own units into this kind of bigger program, so that if somebody has put in an application with the city's program, and they've been vetted, they've been screened, they've done their credit reports, all the kind of stuff that a landlord would normally do on their own. Would that be interesting for if somebody wanted to do that and had a unit at a below market rate? Should they be allowed to also be able to be part of this program and have qualified tenants, basically have a ready-made pool of qualified tenants available for their units, even if it's just one unit?
Okay, so let us know, what are your thoughts on that policy idea? Do you love it, like it, or not too crazy about it? And Kevin, at the previous workshop, we had someone who was a property owner who was asking how could they go about being part of the housing solution, and they were willing to consider a below market rent if they could be supporting a teacher or someone else who qualified, and this is the type of program that would help them.
Thank you. Yes, that's largely where this idea came from, and also just the if anyone has screen tenants and kind of it is a lot of work to rent apartments out. So this would take the burden off of a property owner, and particularly if they wanted to have somebody who was in a lower income category that's a essential service worker or such.
Okay, so let's share those results. So 42% love it. Oh, I'm sorry, the polling is still going on. So let's see, I think we have everyone participating. Let's share those results. 36% love it, 50% like it, 14% not too crazy about it. And so let's see if there's any comments in the chat that might help us understand why people weighed in the way that they did. And I can pull up the mural while we're waiting, and also give folks a chance to, let's see, what it is for over here. Okay. Yes, here it is. So anyone have any feedback on why they made their selection the way they did? Come on, Joey has like 4 blank spaces here to fill up. So your feedback is very helpful, and several people have also made some additional suggestions for the city to consider. Okay, well, if anything, wait, I think we have something coming in right now. Let's see, we have a question. Will you be charging a fee for owners to participate in these programs?
I would say, and I also see the comment that we need to work on this more, but yeah, I think the idea would be there would not be a fee. And that would be, the city would be paying the fee to the provider because there is a cost involved, but that would be an incentive to a property owner, is that they could ideally be able to find a tenant without paying these fees, but have somebody that's already been kind of vetted and screened and in the system. Okay.
So yeah, we have a comment. Someone needs more information to be able to provide a comment. There's a person who, they are for this idea. I'm just not sure the city should be subsidizing the management fees. So again, maybe a little more information might help have a more decisive decision. Question, is the BMR requirement even necessary? Seems like that's something that could be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. And then another comment, anything the city can do to partner with property owners to provide more transparency and ease of providing more affordable options is good. Anything that can be done to increase the number of BMR units and make it easier to rent them out is a good idea. And this sounds like a great one. And then we have someone who is considering changing their answer. I think now that we've given a little bit more information, I like the broad idea of providing incentives for behavior that will make the city more affordable. We should make developers want to create BMR affordable units, not make it harder to do. It sounds like a good idea, but it will be more work for the city employees, and it may cost the city to administer the program. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And I know Joey appreciates having more than 4 squares. So those extra, the additional comments are greatly appreciated. So let's go to our 5th policy idea. So Kevin, why don't you tell us about naturally affordable units? What's this all about?
So this is something, and I've seen some of the chat have mentioned that these older buildings do tend to be relatively more affordable than new construction. Again, rents are high in Burlingame, we understand that. But what's called naturally affordable, they do tend to be older buildings where the rents are a little below what would be the market rate for something new or elsewhere on the peninsula. And there's interest in preserving those naturally affordable units. Now, the caveat is with subsidies, the bang for the buck is not quite the same as with new construction. To do a subsidy of a existing building may require purchasing the entire building as opposed to providing a gap in financing, which is what happens on new construction. But there's a lot of interest in it. And it may be that a nonprofit would buy an existing building, city maybe provides a little bit of funding to help. So this is something we want to investigate. Should the efforts be put into just supporting new construction, or should we be looking at our naturally affordable existing housing stock and finding ways to keep those rents in a lower place as well?
Okay, so let's bring up our polling question and let us know how you feel about this this approach. So do you love it, like it, or not too crazy about it? And then if there's any feedback that you could provide through the chat, that will give us some helpful information as well. So it'd be great. We have a few more people we'd love to have weigh in on this question. Okay, well, let's share the polling results. Okay, so this one, we have the like it and the love it's at 60%, but this has a higher percentage of folks who aren't too excited about it. So it would be great if we could understand a little bit more about your concerns or reservations regarding this approach. So I'm going to take us over to this area of the mural, and Joey is going to be transferring these comments. Okay, so some concerns. It's very expensive to buy an entire building with not as great a bang for the buck. If the city can pick up the pieces in areas where developers aren't suited to do it, then I like this idea. We need a multi-pronged approach that includes preserving existing stock. This would be great to explore. Purchasing existing buildings is very expensive. Providing rentals assistance as a substitute for the more bureaucratic Section 8 program would be a much better use of funds. I think the amount I like it would depend on the density and BMR percentage of the new projects. We need more housing. Shuffling around existing housing doesn't feel like it will be all that useful. Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for those additional explanations to help us understand your positions there. Okay, so we have two more policy ideas we're going to ask you about. So Kevin, tell us about the missing middle and this policy idea.
So the missing middle, if you're not familiar with the term, it refers to, in a lot of places, including Burlingame, we either see lots of single family detached homes. and lots of higher density apartments, but not a whole lot in between. So we're missing the townhouses that are maybe suitable for families. We're maybe missing some of the lower density or medium density types. So now missing middle refers to density, not necessarily middle class, because these can still be quite expensive units. But again, it's relative. So a townhouse is less expensive than a single family house. So it is that kind of middle range type of housing. Some of you may be familiar, as Ruben mentioned, the Anson or Summerhill project, as we call it. On the left are the apartments, and then on the right are the 22 townhomes that were built. The apartments are for rent, the townhomes are for sale. And this is something that was interesting. And we're kind of thinking, is this an approach we'd want to see on other projects so that we are getting more of a range of housing types? Whether it's an incentive or a requirement may be in the devil is in the details, but the idea is, should this be something that we should be thinking about as we look at these, particularly the higher density developments?
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So let's have our polling question. So please let us know your thoughts on this, whether you love it, like it, or aren't too crazy about it. And then if you could share some comments in the chat to help us understand either your interest in or what you don't care for regarding this policy idea. Okay, so I think the polling has slowed down, so let's share the results. Okay, so 46% love it, 38% like it, and 15% aren't too crazy about it. So we have some comments coming into the chat, and let's go to the mural and get that populated here. So let's see. Okay, so it's a great idea that should be encouraged, not required. Encouraging variety is good. As a young person, I would love to see more townhomes. It boggles my mind. It's mind-boggling we don't have more in the area. It seems like building a higher number of apartments is more helpful for more families than building townhomes. Okay, let's see. There's a need for more 2+ bedroom housing for larger families. Are we zoned for missing middle housing? Let's see. I think we did talk about the variety throughout in the zoning earlier. Townhomes are great places to live with families or roommates, and we need so many more places with 3+ bedrooms. Okay. Well, got a good variety of comments there. Thank you for that. And now we're going to go to our 7th and policy final idea that we'd like to get input from you on tonight. So Kevin, tell us about policies related to ADUs.
Certainly. So ADUs, accessory dwelling units, as we've discussed, are the little backyard cottages. They could also be part of an existing house, converted, or in addition to a house. They don't have to be detached. There's all kinds of shapes and sizes of them. One thought, so right now they're very successful in Burlingame. We get a lot of applications, and they do provide an important housing choice for people. There's a thought that what if the city were to help subsidize the construction of some of these ADUs in exchange for a covenant that would ensure some affordability for a period of time. We're assuming 10 years if you're thinking of if you're a homeowner, and how long would you want a covenant? 10 years, maybe 15, we're not sure. But the idea would be that I think a lot of people may be interested in ADUs, but maybe don't have quite the resources to build one. If the city could help, and in exchange for that rent being at a more affordable rate, and probably part of our inventory, as we discussed, is that something that would be a good use of our housing funds?
Okay, So for the polling question, and that should be coming up in just a second here. When you respond, if you say the specific period of time, respond as if it were 10 years. And if you think a different timeline would be better, drop that in the chat as well. So let's see how we're doing here on our final polling question here of the evening. So this one, let's see. Okay, I think we're ready to share. Yeah, we're ready to share the results now. Wait, a few more coming in. So this question got a lot more responses. So let's share the results now, Joey, please. Okay, so this one, 21% love it, 36% like it, and we have 43% not crazy about it. So seems like there are, we can learn from the folks here a little bit more about how they feel about this question and why. Let's see. So let me start here at the top of the list. Let's see, just a question. How much would a below market rent be for an ADU? So I'm curious, Kevin, do you have any idea what that would be based on? Like, would it be comparable to a 1-bedroom apartment, or how that would get calculated?
So the rents are calculated, it's typically based off of a percentage of somebody's income.
Mhm.
So there's an assumption it's going to be about 30% of their income is fair for rent. And then it depends on which income category you're targeting. So it's that could be part of the program is, are we looking for just slightly below market, or are we wanting to get down into deeper affordability where, for example, the 38% of our workforce that makes less than 40,000, would that be the objective? And then the rent would be set on what somebody could afford. So I know it's kind of a long and non-responsive, but that's kind of how that's.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so, or in short, it depends, but that's kind of the calculation that goes into it.
So it's a number, it's algebra. It's not a simple number, right? There's a formula that's used. Okay. So one of our commenters is raising a number of questions. How enforceable is a BMR covenant? Could they be easily abused? What happens when a home is sold? Does the covenant transfer to a new owner? So these might be some questions to consider. It seems like a good idea, especially if paired with expedited permitting. So there's an additional feature to consider. Since homeowners reap the property value increase, it seems like subsidizing them is a bad idea. I like this policy, but would far prefer to see policies implement the subsidized new housing, including duplexes and townhomes before ADUs. Using city funds to subsidize single units doesn't seem cost effective. Offering help with financing is nice, but locking someone into a BMR rental situation will require a lot of follow-up and might not be appealing for neighbors, especially if it catches on. I like the idea, and in parens, the person says, I like the idea of building an ADU for my home, but I don't have the resources. I like the idea, but agree with other folks here that it may not be the best bang for the buck. So the subsidy dollar per affordable home. Agree that enforcement of the BMR requirement might require too much oversight. Okay, well, thank you for all your comments and your feedback on these policy ideas. We're downloading the chat, and Joey has been capturing everything that has been coming in. We just want to, we've kept you busy this meeting. You've done a lot of work, so we really appreciate everyone's participation, and I think this is some good food for thought for city staff as they move forward and determine how these ideas might be further developed. There's just a quick record of tonight's meeting. We have all of our polling data, so we're very, very excited by the the participation that we have had from you all tonight. We do want to make sure with the remaining time for those who would just like an opportunity to speak, we have time for public comment. So if you'd like to speak to the group, I know we used a variety of digital tools and sometimes it helps to just be able to say what you want to say. So we wanted to make sure we had time for that in tonight's meeting. So if anyone would like to speak, please use the raise hand. And if that's not working, just drop me a message in the chat and I can call on you. So just pause for a moment, give folks a chance to respond.
And while we pause, I do want to thank, these chat feedback have been really good. They've been very constructive and really good insight. So really appreciate the thought. I mean, it speaks really well for the community and really appreciate all the thoughtful feedback that we've received. And it's exactly what we wanted to know.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. And we have Noel Langmark as our first commenter. So well, you have 2 minutes and Joey's going to set the clock and he'll take you off mute and you should be able to speak momentarily.
Oh, I had more of a question. I was first I was going to ask what percentage the city of Burlingame was looking to hit in terms of the arena numbers, whether it was in like the one, I think it was about 120% that you're trying to estimate your inventory site analysis plan at. And I think that seemed right with the 3,200 number that you were giving. And then secondarily, I just wanted to ask, because I joined a few minutes late, whether that Bayfront area was mentioned as not being considered for housing in the future, or whether it was going to be.
Okay, thanks, Noelle. And I think we can use a little bit of her time. Kevin, do you want to respond? I think she had two pretty specific questions.
Sure. So the first question, we do want to identify slightly more housing sites than what our requirement is 3,257. It's generally good to build in a buffer. So yeah, an additional 20% buffer is prudent. And that allows for example, a project that comes in at a lower density than what we might have thought. So we do have a kind of list of backup sites to kind of include that buffer as well. The Bayfront is not under consideration right now unless we hear from the community and they think that's a great idea. When we did the general plan update, the Bayfront was not included as a housing area, mainly because there's not a lot of existing services out there. Most of the uses out there kind of self-contained, hotel with a restaurant inside or what have you. Schools aren't over there. But that said, if this is a process to allow that to be revisited, and if it's not now, maybe 8 years from now when we're doing this again. But for now, that was not a part of the plan.
Okay, thanks, Kevin, for that clarity. So then the next hand that we have raised is, let's see, wait, where is Ting Conway is our next speaker. So Ting, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I have a question regarding the North Rollins area. First question is townhomes considered medium density? And the second question is,
So Ting, you're fading out a little. We heard your second question is, and then we're not hearing anything else.
Yeah, it's the Summer Hills development on Carolyn and the Rollins Road. So my question is if the city would encourage to develop this kind of community, but I know there's big percentage of apartment there, but for North Rollins area, what if developer only develop townhomes? Is that no for the city because it's less density? That's my question. Thank you.
Sure. Townhome community would be allowed. And in fact, a while back, we did have a developer saying, could we just build townhouses? So the answer is yes. There's maybe various reasons why we're not seeing that. The value of the land may have a lot to do with it, that once the land becomes expensive or of a certain cost, then it makes most sense to build higher density, but it is something that would be allowed. And that was part of our question that we wanted to ask is, should we try harder? Like, just because it's allowed doesn't mean it'll happen. Maybe there does need to be an incentive. It is a trade-off. You have a reduction in units, but then you're providing a different type of units. So if that is something that would be of interest, we can look into how we might incentivize having more of those mix of units in Rollins Road as well as other areas.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I think with those two questions, we're coming in for a landing just 7:31. Kevin, if you want to do just a quick review of the process here, and then I think we can just have some final closing remarks.
Great, thank you. We've been in our community outreach mode with the workshop last month and the pop-ups. We have one additional meeting coming up, and this is where both the Planning Commission and City Council get to hear about what you've all talked about tonight. I appreciate the really constructive feedback. That's helpful for us to then report to them what we're hearing from the community. So that will be on the morning of April 23rd. It's an annual meeting that we have with the City Council Planning Commission together. It's the only time they meet together. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about the housing element. From there, we write a draft of the element. We submit it to the state for its review, get any further comments back. And then with those comments in hand, we're thinking in the fall, we'll have a public review draft that we then bring to the Planning Commission and the City Council. The objective is to have the new housing element adopted by the end of this year so that it's effective in 2023.
Okay.
If you are interested in that joint meeting, we'll have information on the housing element webpage. And then I'm glad a lot of you received the email. So we'll send out another email to provide you that information. That seems to be an effective way of reaching people. And we'll also do our regular posts through Nextdoor, Facebook, and Twitter and whatnot.
Okay, and the link was just dropped in the chat. So thank you for that, Joseph. And any final closing remarks, Kevin?
Hey guys, just want to appreciate it. And as Ruben mentioned, we know this is a beautiful evening, so we appreciate you spending your evening with us. Housing is really important, and we got a lot of really great ideas and great feedback. I think it speaks volumes for the community. So thank you all for your time, and we hope to continue to see you at our future meetings.
Okay, so with that, again, I want to thank our presenters, Kevin and Ruben, and also with some support from Joseph on some of the Q&A that's in the chat. And we've asked a lot from you at tonight's meeting in terms of polling and chat and comments, and you've delivered 100%. So we really appreciate the effort. And with that, I believe we are ready to adjourn. So good night and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.